I've been waiting for this interview because it felt interesting to be sort of looking at something that looks like me. And I thought that would be fun. So, so here we are. How do you maintain such a healthy beard?
Well, I have lots of practice. During the pandemic, when I could no longer find my way to anyone that could support me in my beard growing endeavors, I took it upon myself to learn how to, keep myself in good shape and in good housekeeping order.
Well, it's a good job. It's lustrous, luminous.
You missed it in the height of the COVID days. It was a lot longer and a lot healthier. So,
oh, really?
Oh, definitely. Yes, we'll get back there during the winter.
Good. I can't seem to get to quite that length, but the hair's good. The scalp seems to work out. I use a good razor in the shower. It works good. That's the move, huh?
Absolutely. Every day.
Every day.
7 o'clock. I sit in the barber's chair and I take care of myself.
It's funny. Just before we started, you mentioned that you used to be a DJ.
Yeah.
What did you used to spin?
Oh, gosh. So this takes me back to my college days when I was at UCLA. I did a little stint at the radio station. So now you're back into the early 90s. So a lot of loud, heavy metal, classic 70s. Led Zeppelin, The Doors, right? And then just a lot of Motley Crue was always top of mind. Anything that had loud, strong electric guitar was definitely blaring from my midnight to 3 a.m. shift.
Wow.
Yes, I was the newbie, so I had the graveyard shift, which worked really well going into a coffee shop at 5 a.m. to open. So I was well prepared to keep myself oiled and fueled.
Well done.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Well done. You play an instrument?
I don't. I tried multiple times when I was younger. I tried to learn the drums. I was a epic failure. And then years ago, a little bit later, I tried to learn how to play the guitar. But just given sort of my work life and how hard I work, it was really difficult even trying to keep myself staying awake on the couch trying to play. So I think after quite a few weeks of my wife finding me slunched over my guitar, she said, nice try. We decided to move on. But it's always been a goal of mine, a fascination. I love music. Part of why I relished, obviously, coming down to Santa Monica was being home at KCRW. So I'm just a big fan of new music, international music, all kinds of music.
Yeah, great. Me too, actually. I find it to be a sort of the pulse of existence.
Mm-hmm.
I find it amazing that you can have basically a formula to create an emotion using sound.
Yeah.
Like once you understand music theory,
mm-hmm.
It's remarkable that certain frequencies will make you feel a certain way. Mm. I've always found that just like spiritually interesting in a sense, even, right? It's like, how does it do that? The connection there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the rhythm. I just love the way music can get you energetic. It can get you going. But, if your mood's somber, there's songs for that too. It's just there's always something to listen to. So I always have something playing somewhere on my headphones or in my office or wherever.
It's interesting when I think about music and it's, there's art and music. Really, those are the two, the audio and visual processing creative ventures. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when I'm thinking about the organizations that I run, how to bring these kind of creative things into the organization. And of course, there's more than just music or art, but when in thinking about building city culture, when we think about people bringing sort of their best selves into an organization, the things that make them interesting, the things that make them feel like they can be themselves and thrive. That's always something that I know I found particularly important in organization building. I'm wondering how at the city level, there's certain things that either you see as possible or can be done or have been done in the past. But more future projecting that can
Sure.
That could be done around this type of personal creative development within a workspace to help people thrive?
Well, I think there's a few things. So we spend a lot of time at work. And in a lot of ways, our work becomes our second families, right? We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so personally, I feel it's very important to be authentic in who you are in the job. So I personally do that by being myself. Like I said, I play music in my office. Sometimes it's the music I love that no one else loves. And hopefully it, finds, it finds a connection to someone passing by my office. So, I think it's obviously showing that by example, being who I am, being the person who, I am when I go home, being fun and silly when I can, when the time is right. Another great example was, I don't know if you're into animals at all, but I have enjoyed, there's a couple of falcons that live on top of the Campanile in Berkeley, and they have webcams on them. And my wife will laugh that I'm even talking about it here in this setting, but I absolutely adore watching these little falcons grow from being hatched as eggs and growing up. And, I put that up on the screen when we have meetings. It's just a wonderful opportunity just to do something fun and different, a little therapy. So, for me, that's absolutely what I think is important. And I see that a lot in our organization, which is really exciting for me. So when I joined Santa Monica, right now, about 7 months ago, I was really inspired by the work of the organization around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Really big words that mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one of the areas where that I've been inspired for where the employees have taken the organization is really strong affinity groups. So folks who are centered around the African American community, the Latina community, Asian American Pacific Islander community, Pride Month, right? You see all these wonderful things that employees are leading on their own to bring recognition, to bring support, to bring awareness, right, to employees, to the community. And to me, that is like a fabulous expression of who people are as individuals and who their community and culture is. And so I really support and cherish and relish that work. And, tomorrow we'll be kicking off Pride Month in Santa Monica, and I'm overwhelmed by all the tremendous events. But, we've seen this time and again, the group that did the Asian American Pacific Islander Month celebration, it just brought wonderful events to the city, capped off with a really fabulous food truck celebration in front of City Hall where we got to celebrate different cultures through dance, right? The arts, just wonderful opportunity. So there's lots of that. September we'll be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. So, I really enjoy in seeing the employees that have really embraced this work. They're doing it on their own time. They're sacrificing extra hours. But to me, it means a lot because it's time for how folks create that belonging, right, to the organization where they can infuse who they are, right, into their work. And that's, what I try to do as well.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I imagine doing that kind of activity and that kind of feeling that you get there is a form of vulnerability and be able to share, things that you may not immediately share with a stranger, but now you're being open about yourself, and that creates the space for other people to do the same. A feeling of safety, right? So I guess when I think about it, that's a wonderful way to do that. So good on you.
It's fabulous. I agree with you. There is vulnerability, right? There is courage for folks to bring a lot of this forward, right? Because, we have to be honest that we live in a world that, is filled with bias and filled with racism. And so you worry, right? I certainly imagine folks worry about how, some of these events will be met or these conversations will be met, but they're just hugely important, right? Yeah. To build a better world, to build a better community, to really move forward and learn about each other and learn what's important to each other. Yeah. I'm just hugely behind it. So I'm grateful for what they do and I support what they do. And I just enjoy participating in the events.
Yeah. Actually, I suppose it creates a feeling of purpose behind that, right? Where they know that they can go into work every day and feel like what they're doing is important work and valuable to them intrinsically and also extrinsically. But that there's real meaning there. And I know that creates good employees, right?
I hope so, right? I mean, I think, everyone comes into government for different reasons and public service for different reasons. For me, it's always been about, the desire, the passion to help people, right? Build a better community, have a better quality of life. And certainly it's important to create that meaning and purpose around your daily work, right? Because the work can be a grind, particularly going through COVID, where, it's been really hard, right? Government workers have had to sacrifice their health and safety to ensure, right, that services are provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I certainly think the more that folks can identify and create meaning and purpose, right, beyond just the day-to-day, really helps keep everyone motivated.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that really applies to everybody in the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
You could argue that's one of the most important aspects of doing what you do. One of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Don't start quoting smart people. I won't keep up with you.
Oh man. Okay. It's wonderful. I quote that often because it always comes up about just purpose and actually suffering. He says suffering ceases to become suffering when there's meaning behind it. And you have a real sense of meaning. It's how he made it through the Holocaust and being in concentration camps. And so I always kind of put that out there, something that inspires me. But there was a lot of layoffs,
mm-hmm.
right? There was a lot of changes through COVID. There was also a lot of good things that came out of COVID. Outdoor seating seems to be a almost unanimously good thing, more than any other thing I think I've heard in the city. Most people seem to agree that, Europe's been doing this forever. We're 130 years late to the game. Outdoor seating in the best climate in the world is good.
Absolutely.
What are the things that you think that we can keep from the new innovations that have come out? And what are, given some of the hard losses to the city, have there been efficiencies that have created or developed from realizing that, okay, well, maybe this thing wasn't actually needed and we should pivot in this way to make a more efficient or a better operating city?
Sure. So, I mean, as you alluded, COVID hit every community different, and it hit Santa Monica especially hard, right? So it was a combination of multiple factors. The reliance on tourism and the leisure industry, our heavy reliance on the technology and office-based sector, right? So a lot of folks, continue to and worked remotely. So we lost a lot of foot traffic that way. And then just obviously, right, just people stopped spending money for a period of time. So the organization went through some very difficult times that resulted in devastating losses. I think if I have my facts correct, up to about 420 employees or positions were lost during the pandemic. And, the organization had tremendous resource constraints, right? So capital programming was cut by more than half. Reserves were depleted, right? All the things we need to rely on, right? To build a great community and to ensure that we can continue to provide services. All of that was stressed and challenged, and people worked under tremendous, tremendous conditions. So, lots of innovation, right, has occurred and continues to occur, and we'll see, what sticks and what we continue to hold on to. So I'll be a little bit more specific. Certainly, I wasn't in Santa Monica, but I can certainly attest to my own experience working in government pre-pandemic, right? The whole notion of remote work, the whole notion of meeting electronically was really more of an afterthought, right? Maybe from time to time, but certainly nothing that was regularly part of our vernacular. I think that we have all certainly come to realize that flexibility in the workplace is going to last for a long, long time, if not forever. So, certainly we, as an employer and as an organization, have to continue to embrace, right, all these things: remote working, flexible work arrangements, right, because people have all kinds of different home situations. Commuting is not any easier, and people really appreciate that. So I see that as certainly being something that we have learned to adapt, learned to adopt, that I see continuing to move forward. I think, obviously outdoor dining is huge, and the city has embraced outdoor dining. We have continued to keep it moving forward. It has its set of challenges for the organization, right? Maintaining streets, maintaining sidewalks, maintaining trees, right? All new things we have to come to learn to live with and figure out how to do. But we have great folks who are struggling with this all the time. And so we're really looking forward to creating a permanent outdoor program for people, for the community, for our businesses, because it's such a great way to enjoy the city, right? Just seeing people out and about. I certainly enjoy riding my bike down Main Street and moving around Montana and seeing folks out there eating. And personally, I do it all the time with my wife. It's great. So, I see that certainly standing the test of time in whatever configuration we can, help to support for sure. And I think the area that's really emerging now, and I've had a lot of talk with our human resources director about this, but it's well-being, right? It's being able to understand where employees are. And what I really see coming out of the pandemic is a much more concerted effort and discussion and focus on employee well-being. As I said, earlier, and I certainly think about my own experience when, the economy shut down in middle of March, right? That didn't trigger from the government side of the house a shutdown, right? We had to go into full operational mode. We had to support our communities. We had to figure out how we were going to manage our resources through uncertainty, right? Who knows how to prepare a budget in the middle of a pandemic? There's no roadmap for what the future is going to hold. How to help our residents, how to help our businesses through these really difficult times. And so what I see not only in myself personally, right, and what I see in many of the employees that I come into contact with is exhaustion, right? It's been 2.5 years of being on day and night, and the uncertainty of having to come to work and not know, are you safe? Are you in a healthy environment, right? We can provide all the PPE in the world, but I remember the early days of the pandemic, wearing a mask. Am I wearing a mask right? I'm standing in line to go to the grocery store. I'm in City Hall doing my business. No one knew about this COVID thing, right? First, we thought we would get it from touching desks, and we were dousing ourselves with hand sanitizer. Then we learned it's all through aerosol. Does it stick in your ventilation system? How does it work? So, that's been really hard. And, you had the original wave, then you have the Delta wave, then you have the Omicron wave. Now we have Omicron, 2.0, 3.0, and people who've been vaccinated, boosted, right? I know people have been sick 1, 2, 3 times with this thing. And so, it really stresses everyone out, and it gets people to the point of just utter fatigue. And so I've really appreciated our human resources director, who's really helped to center our discussions in the organization on well-being. And I know we're going to have to do a lot more of it and be more present in these discussions, me personally, as well as our leadership, as well as our managers, as well as our supervisors, because I think it's going to be incumbent upon ourselves to support folks, right? As the world recovers, it's not just going to be an easy pivot from emergency response mode for 2.5 years to sort of supporting everything back to the way it was. It's going to be really hard because the demands on the human beings doing work throughout the entire organization don't change, right? They were put under tremendous stress during COVID, and now as the world comes back to life, tremendous stress to keep the community really moving forward and humming. Yeah. So I see that as just being one of those things that we are going to really have to accelerate into, that we've learned from this pandemic.
So things like outdoor seating, though, seems like it's here to stay.
Oh, absolutely.
Like okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we got folks, and we have a whole team focused on economic recovery. We've been really present in extending outdoor dining as we've been working towards an overall program. And I hope, and probably this month, I was going to say end of June, but it is this month, if not sometime sooner, we're going to be presenting to council a formal program so that it can be perpetuated.
Right. Anything else in that category that you think is here to stay? Hygiene things?
I think masks are going to be here to stay, right? The on again, off again tool that you need to help keep yourself safe and protected. I think this is just going to kind of be sort of the status quo norm. Home antigen testing, I see that is not going away anytime soon, right? Super important. Make sure if you're not feeling well, don't come to work. So, easy way to test. I see all those kinds of things as being here.
Yeah. Anything that was cut that you think maybe will stay cut?
That's a really good. I like that opening for a discussion because we there's all kinds of ways that we sort of mine and understand where the community is on all kinds of issues, right? So since I've been here, I've worked really hard to be present at neighborhood meetings, attend as many meetings as I possibly can, meet people, right? Get introductions, and hear kind of what is present, what folks want to keep, what folks think, well, maybe we don't need to do more of anymore. And where I'm headed is we recently did a poll and a survey in the community. And one of the questions that we asked folks was, what do you want to see the city focus on in this post-pandemic period? I'm not quite sure we're in a post-pandemic period, but I think we're in a living with the pandemic period. And that's really what it's centered on. Homelessness, public safety, right? Number one. Number two in that list, restoring public services. So when you look at where we are today, compared to where we were as an organization pre-pandemic, we are providing a much lower level of service, and folks are frustrated, right? So where I live in Sunset Park, I'm right kind of perfectly situated between two libraries. One library is partially open, one library is fully closed. And I hear without any hesitation, right, from my neighbors, from the neighborhood leaders, from folks throughout the city, we want our libraries restored. We had a tremendous assortment of after-school programs for, elementary school, middle school, children, future leaders in our community. We're about 30 to 40% of programs of what we used to provide, right? Folks, parents spoke to representatives of the PTA, are hungry for us to restore these kind of after-school programs, which is so important, right? Foundationally in terms of building a community, right? Giving our future leaders structure and an opportunity, right? To play, to learn, to educate, to recreate, to, whatever, so that they're not, just going home as latchkey kids. There's plenty of services that we used to provide that have resulted in sports fields being closed, right? Where families want to enjoy our parks in the open space, but because we don't have the maintenance staff to take care of them, we have to keep some of our facilities locked up. I could go on, and all this is deeply, deeply frustrating. And so, when the question gets asked, I have not heard folks personally as of yet saying, oh, we're so happy we don't have access to that service. What I hear is a lot of, we really want the city to come back strong and restore services. And we're very centered on that every day. Finance director, assistant city manager, myself, our leadership team are thinking a lot about all this.
You mentioned something in there about being able to play and innovate.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's through COVID, through the experience that you just mentioned that people are having, really, and what the city is going through, there's always been this sort of no is the first answer when it comes to doing stuff in cities.
Sure.
And most cities kind of know this, right? There's just like this, hey, we want to put this event on. Hey, we want to, from small to big, right? And there's the total spectrum of this. But traditionally, at least from my years and experience, so ears and years. Very good, Evan. Very good. There tends to be that pushback for innovation and risk taking, and it's not just Santa Monica; it's everywhere. It's bureaucracy in general.
Right.
It's the nature of bureaucracy, but most bureaucracies either know that and are okay with it, or some, like we'll call it like, I don't know, like Google, right? Where actually they think of things like small businesses, right? They think of things like, how do you have a laboratory of innovation that you can test ideas, and they're rewarded for coming up with new solutions to problems and don't have to necessarily worry about the backlash. So part of that is the villainization of people, where they can be publicly dismissed and barraged with mean things. And now that's, on the internet. Their kids have to see that sometimes. So
Sure.
this is some of the, the connection between these two. And I'm wondering how we can continue. Obviously, a private corporation is different than a city based on the people they serve and the need to serve as many people as possible in a fair and equitable way. But how do we get there so that we can have a getting to yes mentality?
Well, I guess a few things, and I'm still learning the community and still learning the organization and still meeting all kinds of employees. My experience of Santa Monica from the outside and my experience of Santa Monica from the inside is one that is filled with all kinds of amazing leaders, right? As I have met more and more employees throughout the entire organization, right? I am consistently excited, enthused, moved, and just really empowered by just the high level of employees that are in this organization, right? That has produced all kinds of wonderful things over time. So, right, I know some of these things are not always met with enthusiasm in all parts of the community. So I say this, but just to show really tangible examples, right? So you go to City Hall, and if you see sort of that City Hall East building that was opened and completed during COVID, right? That was a demonstration, right, to the private sector of what you can do to create a sustainable living building, right? And that building is amazing, right? I know it was expensive and I know there's controversy surrounding it. But that is, right, that's one example of who is, right, the employee of Santa Monica. You look at and I'm going to completely obliterate it, and our folks in our sustainability office will be completely upset with me, but we have our zero emission delivery zone. I think that's the right term. And right, so it's all centered around, a small area within Ocean Park. And, we're testing out these robots that deliver food. We're restricting certain types of vehicles from coming into the area. I believe we're trying motionless cars, right? All these things to try to create this environment, right, to help address this urgent crisis around climate change, to really help bring forward some new ideas, right, for a more sustainable Santa Monica. And I can go on and on and on, right? I'm sure we'll touch on the issue of homelessness. If you look at the innovations that our police department, our community services department are bringing forward around the issue of homelessness, right? Again, another controversial subject, but parking structure 3, right? Dedicating city land for affordable housing. These are all things, right, predate me, but really demonstrate the leadership of the city council, demonstrate the leadership of the organization to advance some big, bold things forward. And so certainly inherent in my responsibility and certainly my perspective is I want to continue to cultivate that. Now, that's really hard in an organization, right, that has gone through the types of cuts that we've been through. And it's sort of, there's a phrase that always rings with me, tyranny of the urgent, right? So you can get very caught up in sort of the crisis of now. And, you can sometimes lose connection with the ability to think long-term and be visionary. And I do my best to try to occupy part of my time with that, right? When I go home at night or when I'm working during the day, try to think about what are the next few steps down the road that I want to leave a legacy or help build the community, right? What are the things that are important to residents or to businesses that I want to lay the groundwork from? And I think to get there, right, you have to continue to provide space and allow for people to make mistakes, right? So not get hung up on when something doesn't go right, not get hung up on when something doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out. You just sort of take that step back. You want to learn from it. And then you see how it goes. Great example. So when I joined the city, police chief joined the city, many acting temporary interim leaders became permanent. We were challenged with the pier, right? The pier had been impacted deeply by vendors, sidewalk vending. And that was a concern around public safety. It was a concern around public health. And it was a concern around the environment. And the organization had been chewing on different approaches and strategies to address the issue. Not my idea, but a great idea, right, was to create a dedicated team focused on, with our police department, with our fire department, with code enforcement, public works, city attorney's office. Again, not my idea, but a great idea from the bottom of the organization, right? To create a team dedicated towards addressing vendors at the pier. And I think without any hesitation, I would say, residents would say, stakeholders in our business community say, we've been wildly successful. But when our employees put together this approach and deployed it, no one knew that it would be successful, right? And when I was educating folks about this pivot in our approach, right, I was always upfront, like, this could work, this could not work. But whatever the outcome is, right, I'm totally open and want the space for us to try. Because if you don't try, right, then you have regret. And so for me, right, it was creating that supportive environment to say, go for it, right? And let's see how it goes. We'll go 1 week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, whatever the case may be. And they did it. And our city council supported us. The business community supported us, right? It was absolutely answering the call of the day. And that's innovation, right? And creating that space for folks to try was what was really important to myself. And our employees that worked on that team in January, that work on this team today, are just absolutely knocking out of the ballpark. I mean, they are delivering results that I don't think anyone thought, right, was absolutely possible when it started, but they've wildly exceeded expectations, and I'm just grateful.
Wow. And you just named some pretty big ticket items, right?
Yeah.
Like big city hall, homelessness, the pier. These are like your big top of the news sort of issues, right?
Santa Monica.
That's right. Do you feel that is infused, that mentality is infused at the more, I'll use the word mundane stuff, or maybe to be more positive about, just everyday sort of, interactions that you have when you go to the service desk or whatever? Do you feel that the getting to yes mentality and that sort of innovative approach trickles down to the day-to-day experience of people and the community with the people at the city?
Personally, I think so. Does that mean it's 100% all of the time from every single person in every single part of the organization? Probably not. People have bad days, right? People don't engage in an interaction well. Things happen, right? But my perspective, absolutely. So, right, small, boring things. You might talk about, so our public works director recently brought a boring item to council, right? Wanted to bring on a classification of a maintenance worker, right? The notion being that a maintenance worker can provide a more flexible set of skills to the community, right? Can be present in maintaining city facilities and can go out and do and build tremendous amenities for the community, like the Bubba Gump to the beach boardwalk, right? So that is, right, the result of managers and supervisors and employees who are thinking about, right, how can we deploy a workforce that is maximally supportive and efficient? And that's a really good example. We have a tremendous 311 call center, right? Going through its own set of growing pains because it's getting more and more popular as the day goes by, right? But that was rooted, right, in the time of COVID, right? Coming up with a centralized mechanism where you can report, right, issues that you see in the community, right? Big, small. I use it all the time. I go on a run, right? The joke certainly is it going to be a 50-minute run or is it going to be an hour and a half run? Because I may stop too many times, right, to report things to it.
I'm sure you keep a steady jog in place.
But, I give, the individual who oversees 311, Christopher, I give him a lot of credit, right? So he is constantly thinking about how to improve that service. And so they're bringing together employees from our our RRR division, solid waste division, and they're uniting those employees with our core 311 employees to create a much stronger operating unit, right, that can respond to a whole host of issues where there was some duplication or there was some confusion occurring, to really help support that function for the community. So yes, I think people are constantly thinking about ways to get to yes, to make things better. But, we're human. Well, there's only so many hours in the day. Right. And, we don't always, get to every issue right away.
I guess that's sort of the way it goes. Do you see or do you experience a level of polarity when it comes to some of these day-to-day things do you experience within City Hall and within the community? But on the general experience there, obviously on big ticket items, there's plenty of polarity.
Sure.
Do you experience that at City Hall where people are, there's opportunity for better ways to get to yes in terms of so you don't have too much battle, but it's done in a productive discourse, less argumentative
Sure.
kind of experience?
Well, always, right? I mean, when you are in an organization with very talented, experienced, some tenured, some like myself that are new, right? Different set of experiences, you're always going to have polarity in how to address issues, right? Some folks bring a different set of experiences to the table and think something should be done X. Other folks think it should be done Y. Ultimately, right, that's healthy, and hopefully that conflict, if it is genuine conflict, can produce a healthy dialogue and conversation and some form of collaboration, right, to find a path forward. And that exists in the community as well, right? Santa Monica is a very dense environment, right? So, I think a lot of places where I spend time on, right, are managing that interface between public, business, and residential spaces, right, where it creates all kinds of, and I believe that's been amplified under COVID, right? People are working from home, right? And that's a different experience to the community than they would have had before. So there's a lot of polarity, right, in trying to figure out and address those common everyday issues, right, to the maximum benefit of those who live next to these environments and for those who are enjoying these environments. And that's a really challenging situation.
Would you feel like the city does this in a healthy way?
I feel like I'm surrounded by talented people that do it all the time in a healthy way.
That's good.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Totally.
Of course, we'll say at the council level or on some of the bigger items, where do you feel there's needs for improvement?
Well, I wouldn't suggest improvement. I think, for me, it's about context, right? So I'm really lucky to have the council that I have. You've got 7 very smart, very energetic, very passionate individuals, right, who have deep connections to the city, right, and who care tremendously for the current and the future of this city, right? Sure, they are very concerned about like day-to-day response and then where we head in the future. So, I think most folks have to appreciate and understand that when you have individuals who have their own belief systems, it will produce conflict. It will produce debate, right? It will produce differences of opinion. What I appreciate is that, they can have that dialogue and conversation, right? But ultimately provide myself, right, which is what I need, clear direction on how to move forward. And I'm grateful that they're able to center me, right, on those issues that are important. They've been all very generous. And I'm grateful for this because they're very busy, right? I think most folks don't always appreciate, this is fun. I mean, council members are public service at its finest, right? They are part-time. You probably heard this before. They are paid a pittance, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all about the commitment to the city and it's all about the passion for the city. And there's all kinds of different ways to make the city better, right? And each one of them like bears that in their heart and their mind. And so they're very generous with me, right? Which is sort of a gift personally, right? Because they have busy lives to help me understand what's important to them. And my job is really to help listen, or not to help, but to listen to that and then bring that forward in the daily work. And so when you talk about improvement, I don't really think about improvement. I just think about continuing to want to deepen the relationship. I think the only other comment I make is also context is important for the council, right? 3 of them came on board right in front of a pandemic. Others came on board during a pandemic. And if you think about, put yourself in the shoes of a council member, put yourself in the shoes of a city manager, right? Like you're inherently inclined to make things better, right? And that can mean all kinds of different things to each individual person. But put yourself in the shoes of a group of individuals, right? Like who had to come into an organization that had just been decimated, right? Significant cuts, lack of resources, and then you're just constantly in a crisis mode, right? Like the primary function of a government is to help manage through an emergency. And that's where they're focusing their first, time on the council. That's really hard. And then you take transitions in leadership, right, that the organization has seen. So that becomes really hard for the council to build, strong relationships with the leaders of the organization to move it forward.
Sure.
And so I don't really think about improvement as much. I think we all have to be focused on the context of where we were and where we are. And I'm very positive about the future, right? Like I said, they've been very generous with me. I try to give them all the time in the world that I can. And likewise, they give me all the time that they can give me. And I hope that will help us as we continue to recover through the pandemic, that we'll really be able to accelerate and really do some of the things that they really want to do for the city.
Sure. Yeah. And I think much of the improvement, I guess I was referring to, is more around the interaction with the community to create decreased, intense, polarity is fine, but the intensity and the level of communication at which that happens can sometimes be highly emotional and particularly unproductive. And the people on council are people. They're humans. They're not machines, right? They have feelings. So a lot of times when I see people yell at them, for example, or come off like that, or make ad hominem attacks, well, one, it's not nice. Two, it's just not productive.
Right.
And you really can hurt someone's feelings who's just a public service. They're, like you said, they're public. This is public service at its finest. Right. Thinking about how to create, and a lot of this leads to how do you get to a solution faster?
Sure.
Right. It's not just about the emotional aspect to it or the be nice aspect to it. The problem with polarity is, one, it can create problems, and we'll call it unrest. Maybe in polarity could even be the wrong word, but that level is it can create heightened responses to the situation that are unnecessary, and it also prevents you from getting to the solution.
Sure.
Or having really productive input. So that's usually where I see, and one of the reasons I created this podcast interview experience for us to have here, is that I really believe that could be approved. And we're experiencing it at a federal level. We experience it at a local level.
Sure.
So are there any improvements there that you see as possible?
So that's tough for me. So I kind of wear different minds on the discussion. So, I mean, first and foremost, I would absolutely love, right, in my ideal world, I would love to be the shield for the council and for the community so that when folks are unhappy or there's a negative interaction, I'd love to be the one to take it, right? I would love to be the one that can be in front of the yelling, the screaming, the upset, the passion, whatever it is, right? Like, I'd love to be that person. Unfortunately, I can't be in all those places at once. And I would love, right, to encourage every interaction to be positive and compassionate, right, and productive and thoughtful, whatever the case may be. Caveat being, though, right, I can't control where any person is at in their lives, right? They may have just experienced a loss in their family. They may have just received some very difficult news, right, in their professional life. And so what I can't control for is like where people are at that moment in time that may result in a difficult, negative interaction for that reason. And so, I try very hard from my perspective to be present and understand I don't know what's going on right in their world. And that interaction may be driven by a whole host of other factors that I have absolutely no knowledge of and no control over. So while I want to always want for, right, positive communications, I know that's not always going to be realistically achievable. I do hope, right, that both employees and the community tries to understand, right, that first interaction is filled with some form of compassion and interaction, but sometimes when you're passionate about where you live and you're passionate about an issue, right? That emotion drives the discussion and it leads to a different kind of energy. Again, I would always love for it not to be attacking or
that's really the key word.
Confrontational.
Attacking is really the key word
Right.
there. Yeah.
And I would love for all of us to have deep training in nonviolent type communication and really know how to work with each other in that way. But as I see it in our employees, I see it in our residents, I see it in our businesses, right? So people are exhausted from COVID, right? People are frustrated with the high cost of living. People are sick and tired of seeing and feeling helpless around the mass shootings that we're seeing throughout this country. And so that can breed, right, sort of an exhaustion and fatigue that can result in difficult discussions and difficult interactions. If we see that in each other, maybe it'll take some of the heat out of the room, right, and create a more collegial discussion. And I do my best, but even I've been prone to failure in that regard, right? I come to work sometimes and I might just be completely, right? You go to a council meeting till 2 or 3 a.m. and then you have to be back at work at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Right. And you can get hit with a big issue. And if I don't take a deep breath, right? Yeah. I'm a human too.
Well, yeah. And we're all humans. It would be nice for in these tough issues for us to realize that about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying. One of the things, of course, now in being in this space for a while is tend to notice that there's a tendency for a small group of people on any given thing. They're not always exactly the same, but there's tendencies for a loud, squeaky wheel minority to dominate a conversation around whatever the issue is, from small to medium, large. And then because very often these people have time, money, they tend to be older.
Right.
Because of that, maybe they're done raising their family, or they're retired or whatever. But it's a small percentage of the population. I wish I knew that number, but I'm going to go with if 5% of the people are actively involved in this in civic stuff of the people who live in Santa Monica, I don't know what that, and I mean active, like they go to their neighborhood meeting or
right.
Then this is like 1% of that, and the tendency is that those voices get heard. They write the most amount of emails, council hears them, and then the entire conversation shifts from what you would think a majority of people may want, but they're articulate, and it seems to create local ordinances. And that's not just Santa Monica.
Sure.
Of course. That is a systemic issue. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that. Is it preventable? And what does that mean when we're thinking about true democracy?
Sure. So I have two thoughts. One is I try to hold on to the notion of every voice is important or every voice counts. And I really try to honor the fact that even if it's one person or it's 5 people, that folks have a lived experience. And I think that it's my obligation and my role, right, and my job to hear one person, 5 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. Okay. So the challenge for us in government, though, is that we are making decisions, right, that should hopefully create a legacy, stand the test of time, right, and serve future generations and leave them better off. So how do you balance, right, what may be a loud voice or a few loud voices with sort of perspective? Because it may very well be the case, right, that one loud voice actually is spot on and truthfully ends up speaking for thousands and thousands of people. So I personally feel like it is incumbent upon myself, us as a city, right, to be engaged, right, to be attending, right, meetings, neighborhood groups, having informal conversations, to be able to understand kind of what are other points of view. So when you think about sort of the staff and council dynamic, right, we bring recommendations to the council infused with the best possible analysis where we have data to analyze, infused with the best possible summary of where the public is at on issues, to help give them, right, as much information as they possibly can digest to make a decision. I talked earlier about we did a community poll, right? And so, some would say, oh, there are segments of the community concerned about public safety and homelessness. Well, the poll spot on, right, identified what maybe some voices in a room are absolutely indicative and representative of what a lot of folks in Santa Monica believe. So we do informal surveys, right? We do informal conversations. We talk with stakeholders, right? All of that is designed so that when I may be speaking with the council about an issue or staff may be presenting a recommendation to an issue, that at least they have other points of view for them to ultimately make a decision. So I think those are things that we can do and do to really help to broaden the discussion if there is a concern, right, that's just an isolated or specific voice. With that being said, right, if it's one person and that person has deep roots and experience and they've got a lot of experience, and sometimes it just takes one voice to move a discussion. And that's how it goes.
Yeah, there are times where one person sparks something that's like, wow, that's true. We didn't think of that.
Right.
Most people seem to feel one way, but this one person created a real thought around, it got us all thinking about this.
So for example, previous experience, previous life, right? I was serving a commission, and in doing the recruitment for that commission, right? One person was really bending my ear about how the application was framed, right? Real minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but really just concerned about the questions we asked, how we helped to folks to identify themselves, their cultural ethnic background, their gender identity, right? One person. And I took it to heart. I listened, worked with that person, me and other folks, and we ended up producing a whole different application. Well, tremendously well received in the community. Really appreciated the inclusiveness of it. I didn't go out and necessarily seek the advice of thousands of people, right? But you can sometimes get a sense when even one voice in the room, right? Your wisdom, your morals, your ethics are touching a chord, right? They're seeing something you don't see. And so again, I always just really try to encourage that every voice counts, because you have to be open to any individual's experience, right? You just don't know where it's going to lead you. May take you down a path you don't want to go down, but it may also open your eyes to a whole new set of experiences or emotions that you never had before. Yeah. And to me, that's fairly meaningful.
Well, so how do we blend that, which makes a lot of sense?
Right.
Of course, sometimes there's just the same people who just don't want things done. On the other side of that, because what you laid out was sort of a beautiful story or experience about when that can work out. When it doesn't work out, it generally feels not fair.
Right. When what doesn't work out?
When there's a small amount of people that can control a conversation. Right. That seems blatantly obvious to many people, and there's surveys done and all sorts of stuff, and then a few people come in with a couple ideas. Generally the same. I don't know if it's the same voices, but the same type of qualifications that make that individual. And it's a small percentage, and that happens a bunch. So I think there's two scenarios here. One is the one you laid out, and the other is the one where it's like, okay, there's really just, let's not do this because we don't want to do it. And it feels like it's the same argument over and over.
Sure.
And there's a balance there somewhere, like everything.
Right.
When do you know what that balance, how to strike that balance? But I guess the bigger question is, what does democracy mean?
Sure.
When it comes to striking that balance, and how do we? Well, I'll start with that. Yeah. What does democracy really mean? And how do we encourage a deeper democracy, and at the same time try to strike that balance?
Well, uh, I think there are many different forms of democracy, right? I'm not sure that I'm quite astute enough in my civics anymore to quite get it right. But
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
no, I'm putting myself. I'll bury myself deep. But we have what I would consider, right, a representational form of democracy, right? Voters vote for council members to represent them, right, on the dais, 2, 3 times a month, depending what the call of duty actually is. And so council members have a set of perspectives, right, based on their accumulated experience, and they bring that to bear. So, right, some assumption may be or necessary to sort of think through that, they will bring forward, right, those things that are important. And again, as sort of I suggest, is I think that it's, sometimes people will say, well, why does government work, quote unquote, take so long? Well, if we do it right, when you build a building, that building's going to sit there for 50, 75, 100 years. So not saying that anything is perfect, but you would certainly want a deliberative process to ensure that whatever, rises up from the ground will be something that will stand the test of time. So a deliberative process is great in that regard. So when it comes to democracy, right, that's where a deliberative process, right, is probably what democracy should be about, an opportunity to listen to all voices, for myself to listen to all voices, for our staff, for our council, so that they can find a solution to a problem that meets folks right where they're at. Where I think you could get caught into a trap, maybe, and this is kind of where the discussion resides, is you make a decision quickly based on, right, that one thing that comes up at the moment, as opposed to allowing for a deliberative process, seeing where folks want to be. And so that's why I don't mind when things take time if it's centered on true community engagement, putting information out there so we can get, the response back about what's going on. Because I think that ultimately helps, right, produce better outcomes. That does ultimately require trade-offs, right, concessions on all sides, in order to allow someone's vested interest to maybe be changed from what they initially went into a conversation on.
Yeah. Well, do you see that do you see opportunity to help engage the community in a richer way?
Absolutely. Always.
How can we do that? And maybe focus it on 2 ways in general, but also at the staff level.
Well, and it's hard, right? Again, there's only so many hours in the day, but I think as we get to more in-person type activities, is putting ourselves in those spaces, right? Not just myself, but I do my best where I can. Certainly our staff as well. And they're doing it, right? So last night, I was hoping I was going to run into you. I went to the PICO Business Improvement District board meeting. And awkward interaction. I introduced myself to this wonderful human being. Ended up being a city employee. So we ended up having a great conversation, and I got to see the work that she's doing, got to learn a little bit about some of the great work that she's doing, maybe even outside of economic development. And so putting ourselves in those positions helps us frame recommendations and helps us frame new endeavors for council that we think are responsive.
Yeah. Quick shout out to Jennifer Taylor,
Yeah.
who is a wonderful addition to this community.
Mm-hmm.
In economic development, also with PIO, who's a great organization.
Mm-hmm.
And, that does show an example of, and I've known Jennifer for a long time, of a type of person who really puts themselves into the community space.
Mm-hmm.
It's exemplary, I would say.
There's lots of folks that do that every day.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
Yeah. And she's really a leader at the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another example of great leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Of people who do that. And I know even for me, like I kind of got started on this path through the Ocean Park Association.
Okay.
And eventually, after years of that, became president and had the opportunity of transforming the culture as I saw it to be one of calmer disposition with welcoming all perspectives. No yelling at the meetings. That was a rule. I had to like actually say something to someone once. I'm like, hey, you don't have to agree, but you don't get to like yell at this person in this room. That's not cool. But these types of organizations are really where I see the neighborhood and business district level are the real opportunity to one, learn how things work. Because you can get involved in many levels, but if you really want to learn how the city works, those are the places I guess I see to start.
Absolutely.
And I tend to encourage everyone who comes to me and says like, hey, Evan, how do I get involved? I know you're active. Like,
or you can join a commission. We have tremendous commissions, and you talk about democracy and ways that we get input. That's what a commission is for, right? Create more perspectives to look at issues. Or I'll give a plug for it, even though they're filled up for this time, right? Our police department does a fabulous Citizens Academy, right? I don't think they'll be recruiting again until August or September. But that's a great way to see sort of firsthand what our police department does all the time. So there are lots of ways to really get engaged with the government. And influence the government and shape the government and just get a perspective. Neighborhood councils are absolutely a fabulous way, but I want to give a plug for our commissions because we definitely want people to engage and apply and really be part of the team in that way.
Yeah, they're great. They're just obviously harder. They're selective.
There's work and
they're very selective. Yep. You can only have so many people at the neighborhood meetings. They sort of want people to go.
Yep.
They want lots of people there. You don't have to necessarily be elected to the board to participate. Your voice is heard. And that's how I think people think they can't make change. But if you start somewhere and you go to the places that welcome you, even council meetings, your voice can be heard and you will influence people by being there.
Absolutely.
So at the local level, I feel like the opportunity for democracy is abundant.
That's why I love local government. It really is that place. And for me, it is uniquely that environment, that form of government where you can see, right, the outcome of your advocacy. It impacts you. Right? Folks who advocate for more police, we bring forward a budget, allocates more police, right? You don't want to see that residential project occur, right? You advocate and the planning commissions and the city council makes a decision and that project doesn't occur. You want to fight for, XYZ to open up or a new resource, right? It can open up. So it really is that area where you see the direct impact of people's direct action.
Well, hopefully we can encourage more people to attend, show up, learn about how things work and have their voices heard and find innovative ways so people can have their voices heard more easily on smaller issues that they're like, why'd that tree go up on my thing? Well, I only got this one card in the mail that looks more like a parking ticket. Well, it's written more like a parking ticket. It looks more like a postcard.
Sure.
And you say, well, how many people are really going to engage on that? Maybe those are the places where we have opportunity, like those mailers where it's like, hey, 5 local things you can participate in like today.
Yep.
Here they are. This is happening. Your chance to be part of this. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, you look great. I always say there is, you can look at if you're bald and bearded, you can look at any bald bearded guy and actually use your finger and say, hey, that's a bald bearded guy. You look great. And there's some bit of a brotherhood there.
There's a connection.
There's a connection.
For sure.
Well, like 50% of our head is the same. The rest you have to make out the details between the spaces.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks for all you do here.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and creating the space.